This program is brought to you by thepodcastfactory.com.
Canine Crew, it's time to just sell the damn thing. Doberman Dan is revealing his contrarian formula for getting a rush of new customers, building your business faster, and making the highest possible profits. Go to justsellthedamnthing.com to get your copy today.
Prepare yourself for the uncensored, nothing held back, no BS reality of how business and life really work. Doberman Dan is off the chain.
You are listening to the Off the Chain Show. Welcome back, Canine Crew, to another fun-filled edition. Last week, we were talking to Nate Rifkin, and he was sharing his ploy to use Facebook and digital marketing to find the woman of his dreams. And we never told you whether or not he found her. And that's exactly what we're going to do right now. Let's jump back in.
So the real question inquiring minds want to know is, did you find the one? Or at the very least, did you go out on some really good dates?
I absolutely did go out on a lot of great dates. That's what's so interesting about this. The entire outside world who never really followed up and who don't know me, all they would see is the people making fun of me. Privately, quietly, behind the scenes, I got over 100 responses from women who were sincerely interested in me and who saw the humor in what I was doing and thought I was an interesting guy and were interested in going on a date. So there were a bunch in Denver. My schedule was like I packed as many dates into the days of these following weeks as I could handle. And even some women reached out from, let's say, Chicago, New York, Seattle, Hawaii, Texas, even overseas, England. So I actually started traveling to some of these cities. I never flew outside the U.S. on a date, but I actually flew around the U.S. going on dates. Because number one, you never know. And number two, as a friend of mine put it to me, I was having coffee and I told him, what am I supposed to do? Just like get on a plane and fly to New York for a date? And he looked at me and he goes, yes.
Why not?
Yeah. So I did. Now to answer your first question, did I find the one? Actually, no, I did not. I met a lot of great women. I liked a lot. Some of them didn't like me so much when we met or on date number 2 or 3 or whatever. And some was the other way around. And when it was all said and done, no, I never actually did meet the one. And it's funny, whenever I tell that part to anyone, they're just like, they kind of shrug their shoulders and they're just like, yeah, so that kind of just sounds like dating to me. It's like, yeah.
Well, duh. Wasn't that the whole goal of this thing?
Yeah. So from here, I'm thinking of making some tweaks and just putting it right back up again, because it turned into such a shit show when it started going viral, and it just turned into a lot of noise. When I was just doing Facebook ads in Denver, it was great. Like it worked and it could just keep going, I assume. So I might make some tweaks based on what I've learned about myself and what went wrong and some things I think I really screwed up. And I might just launch it again.
Did you get any responses like from really crazy psycho hose beasts, like really crazy women, one way or another, like, well, I just read your profile and I'm in love with you and want to have your baby. And they send you a picture and it's like, somebody was chained up in a corner with a, or like any real crazy ones. Or what was the craziest negative one? Or did you get any nude photos?
All right, there's a lot of questions here. I'll answer the last one first. Yeah, actually, I did get a couple tasteful ones too. So yes, I did get a couple nude photos and with messages, and I determined pretty quickly these were not a match for me in terms of what they're looking for, because they definitely were not looking for the one. They were looking
for the one for a meaningful overnight relationship, I imagine.
Yeah, very long term, over several, hours or whatever.
Involving whips and chains?
Well, I didn't see any in the photo, but, who knows?
Okay.
Anyway, so I did receive a number of replies that were pretty crazy. Some were like already involved in a relationship. Some were just, you could just tell they were just kind of like a little bit out there. And I've learned enough in my life to realize, I could read between the lines of the messages that this person, there are a lot of red flags, like it might be a manic person or bipolar or something like that. And in terms of hate mail, it's hard to say what the craziest was, because all I did when the messages would come in, I would read the first few words, and 99.9% of the time, it was easy to determine whether or not it was hate mail or sincere. And as soon as I determined it was hate mail, I just selected it and batched it and moved it all into a hate mail folder. So I never actually read all this hate mail. There were a couple funny ones, though, that did make it past my self-imposed filters. There were a couple responses, like people sincerely, just very nicely trying to explain to me that I was a deranged psychopath and I needed to check myself into a mental hospital. They were just fun. Yeah, they were unfailingly polite about it. They were really trying, and I appreciate their effort. I'm okay. Another person, there was some very pointed hate mail that really got to me. One person was just like, you call yourself a marketer, but you should really be a politician. I was just like, oh, that hurts.
Ooh, that's a low blow.
Oh, that was bad.
It's nothing worse they could call you. Did you have any, like you said, you read the first lines, when the first line said, "You misogynistic son of a," you just automatically knew that one was for the hate mail file?
Exactly. I would just select that little box in Gmail, and I just keep on going down the list and find all the hate mail. And once I had the whole page marked up, drag it into the hate mail bin without reading it. And later on, I Googled all these stories of folks who had some piece of content tied to their identity go viral. And some of them would talk about how they would just obsessively chain themselves to the computer and read over everything anyone was writing about them. And I was like, oh, my heart goes out to them, because my God, that's just torturing yourself. I felt myself having the urge to do that, but as soon as I had that urge, I'd oftentimes just unplug from my computer and go for a walk and just get out into the real world. So all my friends who are monitoring the campaign, they know way more about what people are actually writing to me than I did. I was in my little bubble the entire time, just basically living my life.
Well, that's a good thing, because, being immune to criticism sounds great in theory, but I've even heard from insiders that, Howard Stern, who at least his public persona is one that he couldn't be more immune to criticism. In fact, he even appears to enjoy it and taunt it and egg it on. And there are insiders close to him that says every single negative criticism, negative word said about him is like death by 1,000 cuts. It affects you, Wow. And this is, and this is, but this is, this is something that the doer, the person who raises their head above the crowd, eventually has to deal with. Is, the people whose who've chosen pathetic lives and chosen to do nothing of note with their lives in an effort to somehow, I don't understand how these sick bastards think, but somehow it makes them feel better to tear down the strong man, the man who does have the balls to get in the arena. And the people in the stands, somehow it makes them feel better to throw fruit at him. I still don't understand the psychology of it, but that's a very common problem with anybody who puts themselves out there. So I think it's a good thing that you were insulated from it to a degree.
Yeah. And it's interesting. And it's interesting because the metaphor of immunity to criticism, a lot of immunity comes down to protecting yourself and having those barriers in place so that, let's say, a virus is not weaving its way through your bloodstream or crossing your blood-brain barrier. So part of immunity really is walling off those vulnerable parts of yourself. It's not simply basking and rolling around in the criticism like some people might think. That's actually not what the metaphor is all about. So yeah, I had to do that. And it's, I might have some insight into why people do that, because for a lot of my life, I suffered from a lot of low self-esteem, and I'm still working on that. In fact, a lot of people, I think, correctly pointed out a lot of that was leaking through in the ad I wrote when it comes to relationships and attracting women. And in my struggle with low self-esteem, it's recent enough that I remember that I did get kind of an emotional high when I tore into someone else. And it was almost like a respite from my own shitty existence. And it really was almost like a brain chemical high, which was the only source of contentment that I had. So people who are actually out there making things happen and they have that ingrained source of contentment that they're cultivating themselves, they have no urge to tear down anyone else because they're not addicted to that. But people with low self-esteem, they require that hit in order to stave off the pain. So I think that's where it comes from. And I like to keep that in mind because it's important to remind yourself if you're getting attacked by people, you're dealing with people with low self-esteem.
That's a good observation. I'm reading a book now called Stealing Fire. I think I'm only maybe 20% of the way into it, but it's really interesting. And they're talking about flow states. And one of the things you brought up is like somebody who's doing a lot of things or creating things or just operating in their convergence zone, they're doing the things they love, are obviously, at least at certain points, experiencing that flow state, which from that flows all kinds of interesting neurotransmitters, chemical hormones, dopamine, oxytocin, all these feel-good chemicals. And so the person who's in the arena, so to speak, is experiencing that and is getting their sense of satisfaction from that. And maybe what you said about someone with low self-esteem, that because of the self-esteem issues, they don't move forward with at least attempting to do things like that in their life. So maybe they're tearing down others is an attempt to experience the high you get from being in the flow. If I'm encapsulating what you're saying, that I never looked at it that way, but that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense too. That really kind of adds to the picture. They don't have what it takes to get in the flow in terms of creation, in terms of building something, putting themselves out there. And the barrier to entry to criticizing someone is so much lower that it's sort of like an easy gateway to that same kind of emotional satisfaction. That's really interesting. And by the way, someone made a comment who read my ad during another interview I did, and she said something pretty striking. She mentioned some research showing that negative criticisms were compared to positive criticisms to audiences, and the audience rated the negative criticism as coming from someone smarter than the positive criticism. So I think people are somewhat aware of this in general, that it's just like, hey, if I want to appear smart, I should shit on something rather than praise it. So I think all these sort of things like come together, and especially online with the anonymity, and it just creates this very bizarre, loud, angry culture I don't think it represents the general population. It might be a large amount, but their voice is loud. So it's this weird online culture where everything comes together and produces massive shitstorm, where a bunch of loud voices that just want to go around hating on stuff drown out any amount of reason. And that goes back to like, this is what someone like Gary Halbert did not have to deal with. This is something that direct response marketers in general did not have to deal with. Nowadays, you can have a product line or a local business, and an anonymous reviewer can come along and shit on everything. So it's kind of a new challenge we're dealing with that a few decades ago was non-existent.
Yeah, no doubt. Even if it's an unjustified negative review from just somebody who's, who knows, their ex-girlfriend works there and they just write false things just to, for revenge purposes. That, I look at reviews when I'm looking at doing business with a local company, so that can sway me sometimes.
Oh yeah, they're vital. That's how I choose restaurants, and that negative review could come from a competitor. So yeah, anyway. I hope I didn't forget anything crucial about the campaign. It only lasted 7 days. And well, actually, there's one more thing just to close the loop. The reason it only lasted 7 days is because it was getting on BuzzFeed. Actually, I did forget to mention this. I had the Dr. Phil show call me twice. So the PR actually was working, but I could tell, like, much like other business owners or direct response marketers, these media outlets had no interest in me as a person. They just want a story, and the best story they had at their disposal was tearing me to pieces. So I decided, I mean, a couple of people were just like, you should just go on these shows anyway. I'm like, no, I don't want to go on live TV or something and say the wrong thing. So I didn't answer any sort of media requests, even though I was getting inundated with them. And eventually I saw where this is going. It was still building up in terms of the views and the shares. And I realized, this is going to be my identity publicly for a long time. If I don't shut this down, it's going to be my identity for 30 or 20 or 30 or 40 years from now. And it'll reach that level where it's so ubiquitous that I'm going to become a meme, essentially. So I didn't feel like having that. So I realized I had an advantage at my disposal that most people whose stuff goes viral online don't. I control the platform. I control the website. So I did something that I knew was essentially like dousing the fire of any PR campaign. I switched over my sales letter advertising for a date to a squeeze page, basically saying this, I planned this this whole advertising thing out. I wrote all this copy. I worked with some folks to drive all this traffic. And now I'd like to teach you how I did it. Basically do a case study on myself and enter, send me an email, send me your email address to this email address, and I'll add you to the list. I basically made a squeeze page because I knew, number one, I did want to tell my story about all this. And number two, I knew that every single media company who was publishing stuff about me, when they saw that they were actually just driving traffic to my own squeeze page, they would put a stop to it because there's no way they'd want to support my efforts in doing that. So my friend showed me the Google Analytics graph of this whole thing. As soon as we switched over to that squeeze page, this curve of traffic, I guess you call it a parabolic curve or whatever, it just dropped as quickly as it rose up. It just dropped again because everyone was just like, oh, we can't make fun of him anymore. We can't hate on this guy. He's actually in control of his platform. Don't talk about him. Don't talk about him. And although it was kind of funny to see the emails I was getting switching from you suck, you're the worst, this is terrible, or, hey, how's the dating effort going? Or, hi, my name's such and such, I'd love to go out with you. Instantly, within a few minutes, it switched over to, this is amazing. What a PR stunt. Add me to your list. You're a genius. Add me to your list. I can't believe you did this. Add me to your list. I watched in Gmail the switch. And I actually ended up building a list from this. And I started I started writing all these articles telling the details of how I did what I did, how I wrote the copy, the angles I chose, the traffic buying strategies. And I started sending this to that list for free. And I put it in as an autoresponder series. And I started writing about this on my own blog. So basically, as I started going on all these dates and moving on from there, I started writing about what I did. So it was just 7 days of chaos. And now I'm just kind of, I don't know, I guess you could say I'm milking it for all it's worth.
Well, that's one way to handle it. So I had another idea how you could monetize this. So all the leads that came in for dates that you weren't interested in, maybe you can sell those to others.
Oh my God.
Turn this whole thing into a lead generation thing.
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
Oh my God. Yeah. No, it's funny you bring that up because my brain starts running with the serious implications because, you talk about the audience and their state of awareness. It was really fascinating for me to see how I treated this as a direct response campaign, but I also knew I had to deviate a lot from what traditionally works in marketing because, again, I'm not selling a book. I'm selling myself. So, and I'm dealing with an audience who's they're my age. These were intelligent women. These were business owners. These are entrepreneurs. They're into health, and they grew up in the internet age. So they were aware that this was an advertising campaign. So I had to sort of write to them And sort of like they were almost in on the joke. It's like, yeah, you're reading this long, ridiculous sales letter, but look, I'm putting myself out there. If you like it anyway, here's how to get in touch with me. And so I knew like I couldn't like build out this list of leads or anything like that, because anyone with high self-esteem is just going to tell me to piss off if I start like doing stuff like that. It was really interesting to kind of see real world results on insiders' perspective of what really happens when you do something like this.
That's pretty cool. I'm glad you shared that with me. So if anybody wants to get more information about you, where should they go?
NateRifkin.com, NateRifkin.com. I write a ton about direct response marketing, copywriting, personal development. I spill my guts there, and I give away, I tell a lot of bizarre stories and basically give a lot of cool information away that I really don't see anywhere else. And I also still have that page, shouldyoudate.nate.com up, so people can check out what it's looking like now. Those are the two avenues where people can check out some more of my stuff.
Cool. Well, you got anything else, JR?
That was bizarre. I did not expect that. Good stuff. No, but that is a wrap for another Off the Chain show. We'll be back in your earbuds next time. Hope you enjoyed today's show. Canine Crew got a special treat for you, what we are affectionately referring to as the Off the Chain hotline. Tell us you love us. Tell us you hate us. Ask questions. We don't care. Just call 321-424-6043 and give us a piece of your mind.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.